I'm a divorce coach for men, and I commonly hear this complaint against women that women are mean. I also hear from a lot of women that men are selfish. The internet is full of these complaints, so let's break it down. Why are women mean? Why are men selfish? Women are mean when they feel afraid. Men are selfish when they feel insecure, which is actually just another form of fear, right? It's just the fear of being unloved or unlovable. Some of you probably want to click off of this video right now because you think I'm full of shit. Because when you look at your wife or your ex-wife, you don't see fear. You see an angry, abusive bitch. Or you're a woman, and when you look at your husband or your ex-husband, you're not seeing fear or insecurity, you're seeing a self-centered, narcissistic asshole. But if that's all you see, if you never look under the surface and ask that critical question, why? Why is she acting like a bitch? Why is he being an asshole? Then you are going to end up spending your whole life trying to avoid bitches or assholes. You're going to end up resenting the opposite sex. You're probably going to feel lonely and jaded when you could be building really healthy, intimate, and deeply fulfilling relationships. So if you don't want to be bitter and jaded, if you don't want your relationships to continue to spiral into increasing meanness or selfishness or loneliness, then please stick with me for a few minutes. Let's unpack this. Let's get a satisfying understanding behind the why, and then let's take a look at what that means for your relationships. How can you actually build one that's rooted in partnership instead of a relationship that feels like a battlefield or some kind of corporate negotiation table? We're going to start with why some men act selfishly, and then we're going to dive into why some women are so mean. When men are accused of being selfish, women are usually talking about a couple of different things. They're accusing them of not thinking about the needs of their partners. They're accusing him of needing to speak first or loudest or to have others agree with him, prioritizing his own wants or needs over those of other people, or of not seeming to notice or care how his actions are affecting others. So take a moment to consider these kinds of actions: being loud, insisting on having your own way, wanting your needs met before anybody else's. Who acts like this? I'm picturing a 4-year-old child. And interestingly, at 4 years old, that's right about the age where every human being really starts forming their sense of self, of personal identity. It's at the age of 4 that we're learning who we are and how we fit into the world. And it's around this age that we'll often find the root for an adult's selfish behavior. So a lot of people will suggest that if a child is coddled too much, that they will grow up to become selfish and entitled. But research into attachment and human bonding actually shows something very, very different. Children whose emotional and physical needs are consistently met by emotionally available caregivers are actually more likely to grow up to be calm, adventurous, compassionate. They're more likely to take risks and recover quickly if something goes wrong. They're less likely to fall into a victim mindset, blame others, or take advantage of other people. Such children learn very early on that they are safe, that they have every right to exist and be here, and that they can get their needs met. Maybe not always their wants, but their needs. But if it doesn't happen that way, if parents can't or don't meet a child's physical or emotional needs, then the sense of self that that child develops is much less secure. The child doesn't know if his needs are going to be met. He's not getting this message from his caregivers, from the world, that he's supposed to be here, allowed to be here, okay to be here. He might learn that he has to fight, insist to get his needs met, or that he might have to take things into his own hands and take care of himself. If that child learns that if he doesn't put himself first, then his very needs for survival and emotional balance might not be met. A selfish adult is not someone who loves himself too much. A selfish adult is someone who is constantly fighting to define who he is and fighting for his right to exist here in the world. For a man in this day and age, any of those childhood insecurities are often heightened by the negative narratives that abound in our society around the patriarchy and the evils of men in general. Consider this: a man who grew up with the parents who weren't emotionally available, or maybe who learned as a child that he had to suppress his emotions because emotions were weak or for girls. That child is already going to have an unsettled sense of self. Right? He already has emotions that he was told weren't right or appropriate. And so from a very young age, he's already in conflict with himself. Then this child grows up and he gets married. And in his marriage, he acts out in ways that seem selfish. right? Because they're rooted in those childhood insecurities, those self-doubts. And in response, his wife accuses him of being insensitive, narcissistic, abusive, lazy, selfish, right? And as much as he fights those accusations, a part of him is really deeply wounded by them because they're confirming those little seeds of self-doubt that were already planted when he was a very young child and told that what he felt or what he thought wasn't right or appropriate. In response to that criticism from his spouse, instead of changing his selfish behaviors and becoming more loving, he actually doubts himself even more. Right? The increased insecurity is going to increase his need to fight for his right to exist even more fiercely, and probably cause him to continue to act in even more selfish ways. So if you're a woman and your husband or partner is selfish, then calling him names or attacking him for acting that way is going to backfire. In a few minutes, we're going to talk about what you can do instead, what's far more effective to help somebody actually change those patterns and become a better partner. Right, so I basically just said that when a man is selfish, it's because he's reverting back to an insecure attachment pattern from his 4-year-old self. When a woman is mean, something very similar is happening. A mean woman is a frightened 4-year-old child. She's angry because she's hurt, afraid, or confused, just like the selfish man is behaving selfishly because deep down he's a little boy who's frustrated and scared because the world seems to be rejecting him for who he is. Now, if you've ever been confronted by an angry woman, you probably don't feel like she's scared, just like she's really scary. So let's talk about meanness. Meanness is an attack, right? It's fueled by anger. When do humans, or really any animal, get angry and attack? When they feel threatened. If you are a man who has struggled with a mean or an angry wife or ex, please just sit on this for a moment. People are mean when they feel threatened. Not when they are threatened, when they feel threatened. Always. There is no such thing as someone who is just a crazy bitch or mean for no reason. It does not exist. People are mean when they feel threatened. But now we need to back up a little because the cause of that sense of threat is usually not what's actually happening in the moment. The thing that she's being mean to you about is not actually the source of her fear or of her pain. That surface argument, whatever it is, it's not the threat, it's just the trigger. And the threat itself is something much deeper. Just like selfishness can be rooted in childhood attachment, so is meanness. Someone who is frequently mean, especially to their loved ones, is someone who doesn't believe that they are loved or lovable. So let's look at childhood attachment patterns. If we have a small child and her emotional or physical needs are not consistently met by her parents, what happens? The child sees these people, her parents, whose every fiber of their being, every strand of DNA is programmed to make them want to take care of her. And they're not doing it. They're not meeting her needs. So what conclusion does that child brain draw? Well, mommy or daddy aren't loving me, aren't caring for me because I'm bad, because I'm not lovable, because I'm not good enough. This is a very painful rejection of self that happens when the child perceives that they are being rejected by their parents or caregivers. The child internalizes this, and as she grows up, it stays with her, this sense that she's not enough, this rejection of herself. And so she gets married, and at some point her husband breaks a promise to her, or he makes an offhand comment that makes her feel like he's calling her stupid, or he neglects to acknowledge an accomplishment she's worked really hard for. And all of a sudden, those deeply ingrained beliefs rise to the surface in this blast of painful rejection. She perceives his behavior as a rejection, and it brings up all of the pain of that childhood rejection and the rejection of self that she's been doing for all these years. As a child, she couldn't fight back. She wouldn't have known how. And then all these years that she's been rejecting herself, who could she fight? She's already fighting herself. But now she can fight you. Right now she can pinpoint you as the source of that pain, of that feeling of rejection. And with all of the weight, all of the pain of all of those past years of rejection piled behind it, she can become quite ferocious and nasty indeed. If a woman's meanness and a man's selfishness are both rooted in insecure childhood attachment, why does she get mean and he gets selfish? Why not the other way around? Why don't they both do the same thing? And now, of course, there are women who act selfishly. There are men who can be mean. Yet there seems to be this general pattern, right? These are the complaints that most of us make, that most of us hear. She's being mean. He's being oblivious. He's being selfish. Attachment science and its impacts on children and into adulthood is very well researched. So everything we've talked about up to this point is very well supported by the scientific literature on human attachment and bonding. I have two theories about why women and men react differently, why we see these different patterns. But now these are firmly in the realm of my ideas, my theories, but I'm going to share them with you in case they're helpful. So my two theories are these. The first is that there is a difference in physical strength between men and women, which predisposes women to be more fearful than men. There was actually an interesting study on this recently where they found that physical strength and fearfulness correlated directly regardless of gender. So it didn't matter if you were a man or a woman. What mattered was how physically strong you were. That correlated directly to how fearful you were in a variety of situations. So a woman who was stronger than a man would tend to be less fearful than that weaker man. But in general, most men are stronger than most women, and I think on average it's about 30% more muscle mass that a man has. And so if you're a man, this might be hard for you to understand, but I'm going to try to explain it because I think it's really important in your relationships. As a married woman myself, I am very conscious of the physical disparity between me and my husband. My husband is an incredibly loving man. He's very kind. He would never hurt me. In fact, he would probably get hurt or even die for me. And yet, if he wanted to hurt me, it would be very, very easy for him to do. He can hold me down. He can pick me up. He can move me physically, right? Whether we're being intimate or just playing around, every day I have little reminders. I can take two hands and push as hard as I can against one of his, and he beats me handily. I'm younger than him. I work out more than him. I'm relatively tough and fit. He is simply much stronger than I am. And now before you brush this off and say, yeah, come on, whatever, I'm stronger than her, sure, but I would never hurt her. I know, my husband would never hurt me either, but he could. And so when he's mad at something, frustrated with something else, something that's going wrong, or he hit his hand with a hammer, or, when he gets angry, I feel fear. And it took me a long time to understand where it was coming from, because I'm not afraid of him and I don't want to be afraid of him. And yet, I am a smaller animal than he is. And when he is angry, he physically could hurt or even kill me with his bare hands if he chose to. And I am really pushing this because I think it's hard for a man who knows he would never harm his wife to even comprehend that she could be physically afraid of him. And so I'm hoping that I'm helping you understand that this is not an intellectual fear. This is a primal reaction. So just imagine this situation. We have a woman who has insecure childhood attachment, and she's married to a man who also has some insecure childhood attachment. Right? He acts selfishly, seeming to ignore her or not notice what she needs. She's already feeling a little insecure, like she's not good enough or worthy of love, doubting her value. And he's much physically stronger than she is. Right? To be a smaller animal, sharing a physical living space with another animal that could so easily hurt or kill you, and who is also seems to be ignoring you or disregarding what you need, is it so surprising that she feels threatened? I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying that this is his fault. I'm just trying to help us understand one of the dynamics that often exists in a relationship between a man and a woman, and that I think we often don't talk about. So my first theory is that it's this physical discrepancy in strength and the accompanying fear of physical harm, subconscious, usually quite visceral fear, that when coupled with the perception that a man is not paying attention or caring about you or taking your needs into consideration, that contributes to the threat that women feel, but also contributes to the way they respond to that threat, which is by being mean to that man, by fighting back and perceiving him as the cause of the threat. Okay, so I think that's one reason why women tend to get mean towards their partners when they feel threatened and insecure. My second theory is why men tend to respond to that insecurity with selfish behavior, right? Because the man doesn't feel like the woman is the threat. A lot of the time, unless she's so mean that she does become the threat, and then that can become a whole spiral on its own. But let's take a moment to consider the evolutionary history of human beings. For much of human history, men were the ones who hunted and who went to war. Right? And both of those activities are incredibly dangerous. And if you are distracted, if you're thinking about your wife or your family when you're in a battle or hunting a dangerous animal, you're very likely to get killed. So if a man felt threatened historically, he was probably in a situation where his life was in danger if he didn't defend himself. In that moment, he probably wasn't directly defending his family. Maybe what he was doing was for them, to bring home food or to protect them from a warring tribe. But in that moment, he had to keep himself alive. And he better have been totally focused on that, or his family wasn't ever going to see him again. This is why I think a lot of men react to feeling threatened by behaving selfishly, by putting themselves and their own needs first. I think a lot of it could be rooted in the evolutionary history of human beings and different roles that we played according to our biology. Okay, so whether you like my theories or not, let's come back to the central idea: why women get mean and men act selfishly. The bottom underlying common denominating cause here is that they feel threatened. It's about insecurity. It's about not feeling safe. Right? The man responds by prioritizing himself. The woman responds by being mean to the man. Understanding this underlying threat, this lack of safety, is really essential if we're going to have better relationships. Because think about what we usually do. If your wife is mean, how do you respond? Right? Do you get angry? Do you lash out? Do you withdraw and leave her alone? Any of those responses confirm the danger to her. And it confirmed that she isn't safe, that you're not on her team, you're not there with her, and she was right to feel threatened. Right? You've just confirmed in her mind that, yes, I felt threatened, and yep, now he's being threatening, and so I should feel threatened. And so that cycle gets strengthened, those neural pathways get strengthened in her. How about when your husband is acting selfishly? How do you react? Do you yell at him? Do you berate him? Do you shut down and ignore him for days on end? All of those actions confirm to him that he's not safe in that relationship, that he's right to feel threatened, that he's right to focus on himself, to take care of himself, because you're certainly not doing it. When we respond to meanness or selfishness with fear, aggression, or withdrawal, we are only adding fuel to the fire. We are increasing our partner's sense of danger, we are increasing the amount of threat, and we are just egging on the very behaviors that we want our partners to stop engaging in. So what does this mean for relationships? It means we need to change the way we respond. Instead of perceiving our partner's selfish behavior or meanness as a threat to us, we need to see what it really means. It means that they don't feel safe, that they feel threatened. And if we decide to interpret that as a threat against us, all we're going to do is spiral. We're going to escalate the conflict until neither of us feels safe in that relationship anymore, and eventually we're probably going to get divorced. So instead of seeing the husband's selfishness, the wife's meanness, and saying, this is about me, they're threatening me, can we look at them and say, that person doesn't feel safe. They don't feel secure. They don't feel supported. Can we look at them and see the hurt or frustrated 4-year-old child? Because if a 4-year-old child came into the room yelling and screaming and hating you, how would you feel? You probably wouldn't take it personally. You wouldn't feel threatened by it. You might even feel sorry for that child. What if that child was being really selfish? What if he was taking all of the toys for himself and all of the cookies and only thinking about himself? How would you deal with that child? Right? You might not allow him to keep every single cookie for himself, but you wouldn't get angry. You wouldn't give him the silent treatment, because you would understand that he is forming that sense of identity, that sense of self in relation to other people. You'd have compassion. You would understand his frustration, and you would support him in feeling safe enough to consider other people's emotions. We have to start dealing with our mean and selfish partners as the same way that we would deal with children. Because when we act that way, men or women, we are acting from an insecure child. It is coming from the very deeply ingrained patterns in us from a time in our lives when we learned that the world wasn't really safe, that we couldn't trust our families to support us, that we couldn't trust ourselves to be enough, to be worthy. And it's amazing that we have this opportunity in our relationships as adults to help each other reshape those attachment patterns, to learn how to trust, to learn how to be supported and give support. But if we're going to do that, we have to stop interpreting everything the other person does as a direct attack against us and start considering what it might be like to feel threatened from their position. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it's got you thinking a little bit more deeply about meanness and selfishness, either in yourself or in the people that you care about. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you turn on notifications. We're going to have a lot more discussions about relationships, men, women, and building healthy, successful relationships before or after divorce. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. If you found this video helpful, then you have to check out my free masterclass, How to Take Back Control of Your Life After Divorce. In that hour-long masterclass, I go into way more detail than I can cover on these YouTube videos about how specifically to start to heal, to stop the painful emotions, regain your confidence, and take back control of your future. I break it down into steps and give you a lot of actionable items that you can start using right now today to start feeling better. You'll find the link in the video description below under free masterclass, How to Take Back Control of Your Life After Divorce. I hope to see you on the masterclass and in the next video here on YouTube. Thanks for watching.